stuck in the mail.
Welcome to the Stuck in the Mail podcast. Today we are talking about the album Heart Food by Judee Sill, a very special album that Casey found in the wild.
Yes, and a long-awaited podcast as well, since I've pushed it back an episode.
And we have already covered Judee Sill's self-titled album earlier on the program, but she's so important to both of us as an artist, and these albums are both so important to both of us that we felt she should be the first one who we should talk about twice.
That's correct. We've got two firsts here on the pod. We've got a second, a following up album, and we've got an entire catalog that will now be done since everything else she's put out is essentially, you know, stuff other people put out later of demos and, oddities and live stuff. But this is the only two albums. So 71 self-titled and 73's Heart Food. And I guess to some degree, this will be a compare and contrast.
Right. And if you are not familiar with Judee Sill, let this be an invitation to please give yourself the immense pleasure of introducing yourself to her music. It is available on streaming, and yeah, it's been quite an experience getting to know her music thanks to you, Casey. And
Yeah.
as I think about Heart Food, this is one that we've talked about doing for a while. This Judee Sill is a true artist. This whole album was written, arranged, and produced by her, by herself. Um,
But of course,
it
it includes 27 musicians, which is a real important thing about this album. I don't know how many musicians were on the self-titled, but this album is an expanding of the Judee Sill, universe. She's playing composer here on this one, as there's a picture of on the inside of the album that I wish was on the cover. But
yeah,
yeah, 27. And I did a little research. I just want to point out a few because I think there's some fun ones in here. On bass, we have Chris Etheridge. Chris was known for being in the Flying Brothers. I don't know how I botched that. But not to be confused with Chris Hillman, who was also in the Flying Burrito Brothers. Uh, but yeah, famous bassist there. We have Dewey Spooner Oldham Jr., who was a keyboardist in the Muscle Shoals, aka what Leonard Skinner called the Swampers. Incredibly famous sound on Fame Records, of all things. Is a session musician group that performed with, Aretha Franklin, Wilson Pickett. This guy was on Percy Sledge's When a Man Loves a Woman. Um,
he
so,
played with Dylan too.
what's that?
He played with Dylan too.
Yeah, so some amazing musicians, and I'm going to take a small shout out, one more here for one that I somehow didn't notice, and that is Gloria Jones. Now, Gloria Jones might not be commonplace for everyone, but she did vocals on here, and Gloria Jones, of course, was famously married to Mark Bolan of Tyrannosaurus Rex, later known as T-Rex, the glam band. And she, of course, released herself one of the most famous Northern Soul 45s, which is Tainted Love, which a little band known as Soft Cell, when they were in the Northern Soul scene, would dance to and later covered, as well as the Supremes on that same. But yeah, Gloria Jones, a huge name. So there's
Cool.
some big hitters on this one.
Cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Oh
I did
yeah.
not know all those.
Oh yeah, the deep cuts. I mean, it lists them all out, and it doesn't even say what instrument they play on the inside of the album. It just lists 27 names in alphabetical order. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, Judee is commanding her own orchestra here of talent. And I think that, I mean, she's given full reign here. And, I'm going to say it right now in the compare and contrast. I think going into this, I was a self-titled guy. Coming out of this, I think I'm a heart food guy.
Yep.
And there's
Yeah.
so many reasons.
Yeah. I love both albums for different reasons. I mean, I think we can probably do the quick version of Judy's story, that her background was not good. She had an unhappy childhood. She got into trouble with the law. She ended up in prison for a while. She came out of prison and essentially decided to invent herself, to become an artist, to become
Right.
a musician, and for that to be her life's work. And so she dove right in. She got connected with David Geffen. She was the first artist signed to Geffen's Asylum label. Am I getting this correct?
Yeah.
Um, which was very high profile, and she was very well known among kind of the David Crosby, Graham Nash, Laurel Canyon, kind of
Johnny
Jackson
Mitchell, the
Brown,
Eagles, Jackson Brown,
Linda Ronstadt, that whole scene. So
so
very
many.
interesting because she's relatively, I mean, she's being rediscovered
Yeah.
nowadays, but for many decades she essentially was an unknown, and that's Casey. That's what I feel with Heart Food when I feel like this is an album of deep sadness. That her there's joyful moments on it, but it's essentially her coming to terms with unrealized hopes for her career. When I listen to the self-titled, I'm speaking in generalities here, but when I
Sure.
listen to the self-titled, I hear an artist who is just starting, who's,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
this joyful expression of the art that's inside her. When I listen to Heart Food, I hear joyful songs, but there's an element of uh, disappointment, of disillusionment that she feels like she's trying to will this thing to happen that is not happening.
Right.
Is that
Well, I
is
mean,
that fair to say?
I mean, I think it certainly is fair to say in hindsight of this album, but I think all things considered going into this album and what she's doing here, I think she's going bigger. I really do. And part of her sound is of great love and of great loss. And that's her sound. I mean, let's go into just one song here, not as a song analyzation, but The Kiss, which I think might be her best song. That song, in that one song, it goes so high. Like that part where it's the break, and then her singing goes so high, so incredibly hopeful and beautiful. And then it just comes right back down to that really, really odd note that hits me very emotionally in my soul. And it just goes right back to this flat, low note after it's just so high. And it is very difficult listen, I think, is an incredibly emotional song. And if that's what you're saying, then I 100% agree with you because I don't know how you could sing that without feeling that, obviously.
Are you talking about when she's up high during the like chorus part and then she
Yeah,
comes
yeah,
back
yeah.
down to the main? Yeah,
Yeah, there's
that's
a break there that it goes even higher right when it's going into the break part. But then it does
yeah.
come right back to that note. I don't know the note, but F sharp, it's awfully low.
It's
And
that note that just hovers, right? It's
it
that.
it punches you. It takes it out. It's a challenging listen. Like I think The Kiss is such a great song, and we can interpret it all kinds of ways, and I'd like to, but just the music itself is such a gut punch. So if that's the feeling that you're trying to express here, I fully hear it.
I think so. I think we are talking about the same thing.
Yeah,
And I'm glad you brought up the Kiss because to me this has to be the gateway, at least for most people, to Judy Sill's music. This is
probably.
pure poetry. I mean, when you watch the documentary, this is the song that everyone is talking about that got
Mhm.
them into Judy Sill, and it's easy to see why. I mean, it is, gosh, it's she talks about there's this amazing video. If you haven't seen this, watch the live performance on the Old
Okay.
Great Whistle Test of her
Yeah.
performing this song by herself. She introduces it as the union of opposites. This is a love song, but it's a love song between the sacred and the human. Um, you could take it as the sacredness of human connection. But her music has, in almost all of her songs, she has religious imagery. This is
Yeah.
the sweet communion of a kiss. This is the most intimate of spiritual experiences, being brought into the terms of human relationships. And to me, it's one of the most amazing songs that any artist has ever created. It's just pure poetry and singular vision. And she just that main note that you're talking about, the
No, I know, I
um,
know. But people who are watching this who know the song, they know like I mean it's such a incredible song to listen to. And for me it's I have a hard time I have a hard time listening to it and I'm not going to skip it or anything, but it's a tough listen. It does carry the weight of the world that she must have at this point. And it's really it transfers to you when you hear it. And I think maybe I read a thing that came out when Rhino released this in 2003, Heart Food. I guess it was long. And what's odd about that is I worked at Rhino Records in West LA in 2002. And so I almost was part of this, which is interesting. But apparently, Jim O'Rourke, who was involved with Sonic Youth starting in 2000, he was producer and kind of their general noise guy. So the sticker on the Rhino 2003 release, I think, is pretty apropos. It says, "Take a listen to Judee Sill now, some 30 years after, well, now 50 years after, she was briefly captured on two timeless masterpieces. Her overwhelming songs of love and loss, both earthly and divine, a voice which alone could melt all defenses, and when in harmony could create heaven right here on earth."
yeah, I'm, yeah. I mean, this is what her music touches the depths, Casey. It's powerful. It's almost too deep to listen to. Like you're right. The Kiss is hard to hear,
Yeah,
um,
big time.
and it's just one of the most profound musical moments that I know of. And
I
it's
mean,
the fact that it's captured here. I'm just so glad that it's captured here.
right. Yeah, I mean, if only they could go into like more details of the recording and who actually was in the room and who was playing. Because I don't think 27 musicians are playing on all these tracks. But I mean, you should see the list of viola and violin and stuff. It's in French horn, there's several. I mean, if after this the falling out with David Geffen and Judee Sill, I mean, she can't claim that he didn't support her here because it's not every record label exec that has a flop first album and is like, okay, let's double down. It's the 70s, why not? I don't even think the Eagles are making him money yet, so it's like he must have believed in her, and I don't think it's fair, kind of in that documentary, like there was definitely a distaste with her about Geffen. Even some slurs. Both of them were in the queer community, so I don't know how that would be possible. But I mean,
Well,
it's
she was very driven to succeed, and my guess is that she was very persuasive, and she
yeah,
was probably like, "Yeah, I know my first album didn't work, but I've got these songs, and
yeah,
I know what I need to do." I could just picture it, you know.
yeah. Yeah,
And
and then like after this, what is she? I mean, obviously we know a lot of the rest of her story, but it's just really must have been sad because she kind of just went back to and not a good life, but just must have been a completely normal life. Stopped performing and got into more trouble. And I don't think she ever really found her partner. This whole album is tribute to her partner at the time, and oh gosh, I think he's mentioned on here. I don't even have his name, but it's not her first partner, JD, who was an asylum artist as well. But
yeah,
we
you're
should,
talking about David. I've
yeah,
got
yeah,
it
yeah.
here.
He's the first list on the
David
musician.
Bearden.
David Bearden, yeah, exactly. Um, so I mean, I don't remember. It's a long time ago I saw the documentary, but um,
Well, talking about her songwriting here, one thing that struck me listening to this album several times again is, especially here, she's really leaning into octaves, and octaves is something that
yeah.
all of her most powerful songs seem to have. You know, it's she's just the Kiss is full of octaves. Almost every song on this album has that's what gives her that unique sound to me.
Mhm.
Is you don't usually hear female singers singing in octaves.
Right. No, for sure. For sure.
Um, but
Especially, I mean, are we hinting at the donor here?
well, I want to get to the donor because it's a heck of it's a heck of
Yeah.
an experience, a musical
Yes.
experience. If we could talk about some of the other songs,
Yeah.
so "Down Where the Valleys Are Low," what an interesting song. Doesn't it sound like a demo to you?
A little bit. I was listening to side one today. I'm trying to get to the point where I hear it in my mind right now. That's the one that has a real trot to it. So did it kind of like there's a rugged road or whatever. A lot of her songs that have this Western feel of a trot or maybe a
Yep.
cantor. No gallops though. There's no Iron Maiden on here. But there's a lot
Well,
of like loping through the cosmos. It has that feel where it's like do, 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 or maybe there's a rugged road, but yeah, down where the valleys are low.
it just feels like it has all the pieces, but it doesn't have any drums. It's just kind of this interesting arrangement, but it's very soulful too. And this is
Yeah,
the track on this album that kind of reminds me of something like, she talks about when she was in prison that she discovered gospel music.
right.
And this kind of feels like that sort of soul aspect of her that is, you have this sort of like Christian mysticism about her, but then you also have this soulful, joyful, exuberant side, which on the first album comes out in that the name escapes me, but it's toward the end, the song that I really love that's super soulful, piano based. But here it's "Down Where the Valleys Are Low," and to me, this is the part of the album where this is the one track that I sort of wish had a different arrangement because I feel like if it had a full band,
Hmm.
it could really swing. I don't know. This one's tough for me.
I wish I had more of the arrangement in my head. Um, I mean, that song title is one, like many of Judy's songs that feels very non-secular, and it just has that gospel feel to the title, certainly. There was two songs on this that were actually written and are dated for publishing rights on the vinyl on the record for the first album, and I think that's the Pearl and the Phoenix. So those
Yeah.
songs they were leftovers. Heart
Yep.
Food has two leftovers from the self-titled era, which,
Yeah, and they sound a lot more lush here, but you could definitely, as far as the song structures and style, they would fit right in with self-titled.
yeah, yeah.
Speaking of like full production, the one song on here that does feel like it has the production to be a hit would be "Soldier of the Heart." That I like it. I'm not sure it
Yeah,
quite. There's something about it that doesn't fully fit, like sit in the pocket. To
yeah.
It's almost there, right?
It's kind of pop for her. I don't know if she was really trying for something there. You obviously, I can't imagine the Kiss being played on the radio. People driving off roads and stuff. You I mean, I
Well,
don't know what David get. You got to sometimes think like a record exec or label guy or A&R guy and be like, okay, where's the single here, Judy? And I guess Soldier of the Heart. Uh,
and
there's a
this is
rugged
my
road.
thing. This is the thing that I feel like is kind of tough with these albums is that it's part of why they're not as marketable is the
Right.
sequencing. Like, if you were trying to sell a bunch of records, you would put "Soldier of the Heart" as the lead track. Just like on the first album, I feel like it takes until track 4 or 5 to really get going. Like,
Yeah, a little bit.
there's
Yeah.
the archetypal man, I think is what it is. That's the one on the first record that I like, but it just feels misplaced.
Yeah. Have you noticed that both albums, now they're not the same notes, I believe, but the tempo and the feel of the chord progression of Crayon Angels and also what is the start of this one? Ah,
Rugged Road.
there's a rugged road. I feel both of her albums, they start off so similarly.
Yeah, they do.
Uh, and that's interesting. I mean, and then she wants you to dive in, and there's no casual. You got to keep in mind that this album, Heart Food, it came out on 8 track. I don't think I'll ever find one, you know. And obviously the sequencing for that was all over the place, like all 8 tracks. But this era, this was meant to be heard on album.
Yeah.
So, and most people drop the needle at the beginning. They don't have the skills to move it in there. But you know,
Well,
um,
and you've got, so talking about the songs, you've got you got a heck of a song tucked in there, second to last. Well, third to last, I guess. And that's When the Bridegroom Comes.
Yeah,
What
that
do you
was the
think?
one for Bearden, I believe.
So this is super interesting to me because the lyrics were apparently written by Bearden.
Yes, yes, yes.
And this is the one I will say the lyrics can get a little clunky in the structure a little bit, but this is the one that is just like, whoa, when you stop and listen to it, you're like, there is nothing else like this. So, are you ready for me to break down some of these biblical allusions, Casey?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're moving towards that if we're doing the donor next. So, yeah, go for
So, the majority of the song is pretty clearly tied to the parable Jesus told about the 10 bridesmaids, which I don't know if you're
it.
familiar with that one, but it's very apocalyptic. It's very mysterious. It's one of those where you read it and you're going, I don't understand who I am in this.
Uh-huh.
I just know that there's some people that are ready for the bridegroom to come and some that are not, and you definitely want to be ready.
Yeah, even the term bridegroom is confusing to me. I don't understand if that's the groom or the bride, or if it's the
Well,
bride
it's the
groom.
groom, but we are
Yeah.
all the bridesmaids, not the bride.
Okay.
The, it's mysterious is the word.
Okay.
And then you have these references to the stone that the builders rejected, which is a biblical reference to Jesus. You have the pearl of great price
Okay.
that you would purchase above all others. That you commit your life to your faith. You have a reference to the valley of dry bones, which that comes from the prophet Ezekiel, which was a prophecy in the Old Testament about the nation of Israel being
Hmm.
restored. This is
Hmm.
all within like 3 lines of
Yeah.
the
And
stone the
also,
builders rejected, the pearl of great price, and the valley of dry bones.
yeah, and it seems also like we're hinting on other song titles here because the Pearl and Down When the Valleys Are Low.
Yes.
Now, is this part is this from the Sermon on the Mount or
No, it's just basically these there it's these phrases that are common that are
Mhm.
foundational to Christianity, I guess,
Right.
biblical allusions. But here's the thing that as I'm left listening to this song and I'm like, it sounds kind of like Joni Mitchell-esque in the music, and I'm like, there's no audience for this. Like, no one
No,
wants
no.
to hear biblical mysticism in Joni Mitchell folk arrangements,
Right.
but it's brilliant. But no one,
Right.
it's not marketable.
It's like I said on the last one. I feel like she truly had a point of like being completely unmarketable because she would probably turn off people who were, religious. And then the same way, there's no way people who aren't religious are going to casually be like, "Oh, this is cool." So it's really taken like, time to give her the chance to be like, well, this is an artist and this is what she had to say. And you don't need to be religious and you don't, you can be anything. You can be religious. I picked this because I thought I've known about her. I thought you would really enjoy her. And it was my
Mhm.
pick for you. And you have grown to really enjoy her. And I think surpassed my enjoyment. And that's exactly what you want. It's better to give than to receive. So, that's the place that I'm coming from with this album. And it's like the title says, it's heart food. So it is a challenging listen, but it's supposed to be good for the soul. I believe that her message here, although her path might be a darker one, I believe her message here, her voice is that, this is good for you and this is good for the soul. And
It's good for the soul, and she takes up a space to me of kind of definitely not mainstream. Let's put it that way. Christianity,
totally.
like this would be in the realm of Christian mysticism.
Oh yeah,
So
for
I was
sure.
doing a little bit of research on that. So the idea there would be that this is consciousness of God's presence in your inner being,
Yeah.
right? So there's the word is theosis or spiritual union with God.
Mhm.
Um, Wikipedia says ecstatic visions of the soul's mystical union with God. Which immediately I think of loping through the cosmos. I'm hoping so hard for a kiss from God. Like this is the kind of language. It's in the kiss as well. This is
Mhm.
again the sacred and the human um, combining. I found some really interesting comparisons here. There's a critic, Barney Hoskins. I want to give him credit for this, but basically, you'll enjoy this. He compared her work to the quote, cosmic epiphanies of William Blake.
There we go.
And of course, Blake was also writing within a Christian context. Um, but this critic Hoskins, he is talking about Judee Sill, and he says that Christ to her is a symbol of the quote, elusive, yearned for lover.
I think that's so apparent in Judy's music. We could talk about the religious implications of her lyrics and everything else literally forever, but I think what we have here, and I've touched on it before, and this is kind of a sad note. I think we have someone here who I said in the last episode is somewhat of a on the exterior of plain Jane, and I think who is really yearning for love in the physical world and just doesn't find it. I think that's the
Yeah,
saddest thing about Judy. And I think you can hear that. And I think she turns to God, to Jesus or whoever to find that. And I think that's what you're supposed to do. But I also feel like Judy's wishes here on earth were unfulfilled. And that's the sad part of her.
yes, and her songs are for that yearning, and that's why they're so relatable, I think.
Yeah.
Um, they come to a head on the most harrowing track, which is The Donor.
Yeah. For us laymen's out here, what is going on with this song and how long did this take to record? And I guess Gloria is probably on it too. It's all the
I mean,
vocals, right?
I've spent a lot of time with The Donor trying to figure it out. Not that one can figure this stuff out, but um, do you feel like she is the donor? Is this an autobiographical song?
Well, if so, it would make for a fitting end to her last album. But of course, maybe this is Geffen, and I did really want to touch on this. There's after this what I can only call the origins of the first hidden track. Because it's on
Yeah,
Spotify as a track, but it's not an album cut. The jig is what they call it, or just jig, which is a full-blown orchestra symphony with the lead being the jaw harp, being the boring, 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 boring.
yeah. I feel like the
Feels like an
jig is there
outtake.
just, it's like a moment of levity after the
Yes.
insanity of The Donor that you just heard
Yeah,
for eight
both
minutes.
both these we'll get back to that. Bringing some levity to the conversation here. The first album, of course, ends with just like it jumping off and going like "Doo-doo-doo." And it's just like, what is going on, you know?
Yeah,
And just like, what? And then this one, of course, has the jig, which literally is just an orchestral jig with the Jaws harp on lead. And maybe that was just to lighten the album. Maybe Geffen stepped in and been like, "We're not finishing this with the donor. We're not finishing this." But maybe she inadvertently created the secret track. I don't know. You tell me out there, internet.
maybe so.
Really
Well,
important.
can I read some of the lyrics here of The Donor?
Yes, please. I know it's from Psalms, right? The Kyrie eleison.
Well, it's not from Psalms, but Kyrie eleison is from the Mass,
Uh-huh.
and it means Lord have mercy. And
Yep.
to me, this is just the person in, wow, this is someone who is in the depths of the human condition, but it's a solitary song. Like this, to
Right.
me, this is she's trapped, right? So here are the lyrics. Um, I'll chase him to the bottom till I've finally caught him. Dreams fall deep. Where voices come a chiming, moaning and rhyming, warning me their words are ringing and whining. Hear 'em weep, songs from so deep, while I'm sleeping, seep in, sweeping over me. Still the echoes aching, leave us not forsaken. This is the part that sounds like Bach, where she's like,
Mhm.
still the echoes aching, leave 'em not forsaken. Kyrie eleison, Lord have mercy. Even shadows come and hum the requiem. This this is quite something for pop music, Casey.
Yes. It, and also like where else can this start, or where else can this be, you know? I have so many records and there's nothing else that is this era of the early 70s, 60s 50s fallout where you have someone who's come into money who essentially is like, I'm going to record my friend's awesome music. And later he would be very successful, actually incredibly successful. DGC Records, he kept promoting alternative artists as an alternative person himself. But I think what he did here on this album, Heart Food, stands testament to something even greater, you know? Because who knows?
Yeah.
I'd like to find out how much this album cost because he wasn't just running a studio, he was running 27 musicians for Judee. And, you know, it's unbelievable. People
It's
always talk of the excess of the 70s album and the recording experience, but for who Judee was and what she you know, sold, did volumes for and what this is, there's no other experience of this as a recorded piece of work, you know? There's just not. That's
yeah.
why there's not
And
another one. That's why there's not a third Judee Sill, you know?
right.
Where do you
And
go after her food?
when I think of the donor, the title, to me, it's she's put it all out there. You know,
Yeah.
she's
She's
given
done with this
herself.
song. She's done with
She's
this song.
as the artist, she's put herself out there. She's the donor. She's been, but she feels forsaken. Like you're talking about the early 70s. Like this was the same year that Buckingham Nicks happened. Like people
Yeah.
were looking for pe- artists
Something
that looked
different.
that looked and sounded like stars. You know,
Yes. Yes.
and it's understandable. Like it's the same reason why it took me a long time to get into Judee Sill, even though you had told me you got to listen to Judee Sill. It took me a long time because it's hard to listen to songs about. It's hard to listen to the donor, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, I know. I mean, that's the thing though, is that that's how music is. There's a lot of stuff you hear on the radio, and you might like it immediately, and then you see who it is, and you're like, oh my gosh, Bad Bunny, and you're like, okay, well, it's catchy. Listen to it a few times. I mean, I like what's going on with music, Spanish music right now. But you know what I mean? Like when you attach yourself to something and really dig in harder and try harder, and then you realize what was there. I mean, I think that's when you create those musical experiences that never leave you, you know. You have to put in work with music. It's weird.
Yeah.
You know,
And I don't mean to say that it's not pleasant to listen to because I can put this on and be taken to a very comforting place. It's
yeah.
it's you feel you relate to her and
It washes over you too, you know. It really
yeah.
does.
And it's not a downer. I'm not saying that when I listen to this I get depressed. I actually think it's deeply beautiful.
Yeah. It's internalizing. Like I sat down yesterday and I wanted to listen to this one more time before the pod, and I put it on the platter, you know. I'm doing the record thing here, and this is one of my most, if not treasured albums. Shout out to Paul in the Bay Area. Thank you. It's amazing you found that acetate in Japan. But anywho, also shout out to Miguel for telling me that Paul had it. I hope your eye fixes itself. Anywho, I mean, I put it on and I listened to almost this whole first side without, I did look at my phone a little bit, but almost without looking at my phone. And I can't do that for anything anymore,
Yeah.
which is sad, you know? It's just remarkable listening experience. And of course, the Kiss got me as always.
Yeah.
um,
I think to me the self-titled is a bit more of a hopeful listen. You know, you end that one essentially with Loping Through the Cosmos, which is a lot more, you know, um, it's a more settled ending. Heart Food really reaches the depths as an album. It also ends in a
Now,
it ends in a it
don't
ends in
forget
a
the jig.
challenging place. Yeah, thank goodness for the jig.
Don't forget the jig. That's reminding you to, I guess, to dance a little in life, I suppose. I mean, I'm glad it's there. I think it's so funny with that jaw harp out in the front. I don't know who's playing that, but I realized that when we did the first episode, I said I was thinking about Asylum and country rock and all that, and I even said I was like, man, what could have Judee done, you know? And I think there was a path forward for her, not as a lead, and that's what killed it for Judee. But I mean, here we have Chris Etheridge from the Flying Burrito Brothers. I mean, what if she had joined the Flying Burrito Brothers? That totally
Yeah.
would have been awesome. They needed, I mean, they had Emmy Lou and whatever later, but. I don't know.
It's nice to think of the alternate reality, because it's sad to think of, the car accidents that she faced and the
Yeah.
challenges with the substances and
Yes.
but I'm just so grateful that she created these two works of art. And if
Yeah.
you are listening to this and you haven't given them a try, take some time, really dive in. That's what it takes to really, but it doesn't take long.
Oh, the glare.
It's an incredible body of work for two LPs.
It most certainly is. And I mean, it's like everything in life. You can be ungrateful that there's not more. You can be thankful that there's this much. So,
Yeah. Um, Very Nick Drake-esque.
yes. And speaking of which, we have our next pick, which oddly enough, I was gonna pick Nick Drake, Pink Moon, but I think that might be a little too monotone, and we might fall into like the some kind of algorithm where we're only picked up by goth channels or something for our darkness here. So, I don't know if it's possible to pick something as beautiful as Judee Sill, but I might have done it here because apparently the podcast we're only challenging ourselves here, Mike. So I have something for you that has been really like Judee Sill, really uplifting and just painstakingly beautiful. And I'm going to say a little lighter on the ears too, an interpretation. And when I say that you don't know this one, that's because I mean no one knows it. It's on Spotify, but we're doing Gudrid Hansdotter. And I'm gonna mess this up, but Gott Merkur. And what this is an album by a well-known Faroese artist from the Faroe Islands, which is a Danish territory that was independent. And Faroese is an ancient Scandinavian language that is most akin to what the Vikings spoke. So this is a really interesting sound on the ears. I went to the Faroe Islands in 2022 for essentially my late honeymoon post-pandemic, and I went to a record store in Tórshavn, which is Faroese for Thor's Harbor, which was the capital. And I went in there and I said, "Do you have any Faroese music?" And they suggested Gudrid Hansdotter, who's very famous there. And keep in mind, this capital has like this amount of people of Ukiah, and I got that and I took it home and I played it and I was like, "Oh, this is cool." But I recently kind of dug it up, and I think it's like Judee. It has a very ethereal quality, and actually, there is something I remember that I wanted to say about Judee Sill. I wanted to say that her music is, to me, it is. I was dreaming about this last night. To me, her music is like a light. I really feel that way. So that it's a very simple concept, but it can be external or internal. But I feel like her music is a light. So.
Love it.
So that's and I think you're gonna like Gudrid Hansdatters, which note that in Scandinavian, you could be a son like myself. I'm a Tom's son, which has a whole fabled story I might get into next episode because it doesn't refer to blood lineage. It refers to a man stepping in and taking care of another man's kids. But you can also be a daughter, um, because in Scandinavian culture, also women could have land and they had a lot more rights than at the time some cultures. So I think you're gonna love this Faroese music.
Cool. I was about to say this is our first Faroese album that we've covered.
Somehow it's taken 31 episodes to finally get to the one of the most least known countries in the world.
Well, I look forward to it, Casey.
Yeah.
Thanks again for introducing me to Judee Sill.
Of course, I had you in mind, and I hope that it is a light for you. And because her music is pure and beautiful and ethereal and all those other good things.
Yep.
Uh,
All right. Until next time.